And may we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Chair Showalter,
Here.
Tyson.
Here.
Meadows. Here. Klein.
Here.
And joining us remotely pursuant to Government Code Section 54953.8.7, Vice Chair Scazola.
Here.
Thank you so much. We have a quorum of our committee.
Excellent.
And
Okay.
I'm sorry, Director Martinez-Beltran.
Here.
Thank you.
Now we have a course.
Did you see me? I was going. That's okay. Wait. All right. So now we come to public comment on matters not listed on the agenda. The public may provide comments on any matter not listed on the agenda, provided that it is within the subject matter jurisdiction of SVCE. Speakers are customarily limited to 3 minutes each. Depending on the length and complexity of the subject matter, we can change that. Speaking time will not be decreed to less than 1 minute. Do we have any speakers that we need to think about speaking time at all?
No hands raised, but we do have members of the public present online.
So perhaps on other items. Okay, then we move to the consent calendar. That's an action item. And I would like, does anyone have any questions? Okay, all right, so we need to have public comment. Any public comment on the consent calendar item?
No hands raised.
Okay, thank you. So let's have a roll call vote, please.
Tyson moves approval. Second by Klein.
Ah, of course, that's a good idea. Motion?
Okay.
Thank you. And the vote, Director Martinez-Beltran.
Yes.
Tyson. Scazola.
Yes.
Klein.
Yes.
Showalter.
Yes.
Meadows. Yes. Thank you, that carried unanimously.
All right, great. All right, so now we'll move on to the regular calendar. And the first item on that is the CEO update. Monica.
Sure. So we have two updates. The first one I want to provide is, I'm actually doing this a little bit winging it, but yesterday, the California Public Utility Commission, or CPUC, voted out a decision providing a new procurement order. And these procurement orders sometimes we refer to as midterm reliability procurement orders, but we often, when we speak to the board or the executive committee, we reference this procurement order. What procurement orders are, they are mandates for certain types of resources, namely clean resources and battery storage or clean energy and storage capacity. They have to get put online by a certain date. It's all new capacity. And all of the CPUC jurisdictional load serving entities have to meet these procurement orders. So the new procurement order is for an additional 6,000 megawatts of capacity that has to come on as early as, I already forgot what year that was, I think 2028. So not a whole lot of time to get these orders on. And our share of that is roughly 135 megawatts of additional capacity. So this brings the state's total procurement orders, and I think they've done 3 so far, to a total of 21,500 megawatts. SVCE share being 450 megawatts. So if you have to put it into context, we're about 900 megawatts is what our peak load is. So this is 450 megawatts of nameplate capacity, and there's going to be a lot of rules about how we count different resources, whether it be solar, wind, or geothermal, but it's quite significant. And so we're looking at what we have in our portfolio, what we have in the works, what we've been doing with CC Power, to see if there's any way that we can we can use some of our resources that we are negotiating right now. But if not, we're going to go back out in the market and look for additional resources to meet this requirement. So this was somewhat of not a surprise. We knew it was going to come. We didn't think it was going to be this large. We were hoping that the CPUC would incorporate some comments that were provided by different load serving entities, including ourselves through CalCCA, about the need to look at the load forecast, because they're using a pretty aggressive load forecast here, assuming a lot of load growth associated with data centers, electrification. And we had also hoped that they would at least consider kind of an incremental approach, so that if there was a change in Diablo Canyon, which Ben is going to talk about in a bit, that would be included, since that's 2,000 megawatts of clean capacity that could be counted. But they did neither one of those. But they did incorporate several changes that the CalCCA had requested, and so we're at least happy that it could. It's not as bad as it could have been. So Maureen is, she's online if you have any questions. But otherwise, that was it about that. Director Martinez, yeah.
Just quickly, you said 2028, when in 2020?
So usually it's by June of 20, that's how the past procurement orders have been.
Lauren's raised her hand.
Oh, Maureen, I'm sorry, it's not 2020, it's 2030. So she's gonna correct me.
You just corrected yourself perfectly. Yeah, this order is we have obligations for 2030, 2031, and 2032. So, and it is June 1st of each of those years that we will need to bring capacity online. So our obligation is 45 megawatts for each one of those tranches.
So under the existing procurement order, we have an obligation still that we're working towards for 2028, but for the most part, we've done a really good job of filling that original procurement order need, so. Wow.
Quick question. So I'm thankful that it's 2030 as opposed to 2028, because I'm like, it would be really a seller's market at that point that everybody's trying to add load, which would completely have driven up the price and all that.
Mhm.
What's your target for, meeting this? I know we'll start the discussions.
Yeah, so we have a solicitation out right now, the request for offers. The proposals are due back to us, I think, sometime in mid-March.
Okay.
And so then we go through a lengthy process to apply all of our evaluation criteria that we have, including the criteria that the board approved recently through our purchase agreement selection criteria policy that Benna brought to the board. So we go through a lengthy process to evaluate all this because we usually get lots of proposals. Unfortunately, we get a lot of solar and storage proposals. We don't get a lot of anything else like wind and geo, which are resources that we prefer at this point, given the amount of solar and storage we have in our portfolio. But if all goes well, we should be able to bring something to the board, hopefully by late summer, early fall, with some projects. And those usually take like 3 to 4 years to bring online.
Yeah.
That's kind of the new norm.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none.
oh, we have another part of the CEO report too. We have Zoe Elizabeth who's going to talk about give you an update on the building progress, the new building progress.
Waiting patiently to see this statement, which is that construction has begun.
Wow.
Yeah, paid our permit and work is going. The current schedule that they have is to be complete June 30th. Which I think is about 10 days later than we were originally hoping for, but still on track for us to move in July.
Wow.
And
I mean, the permit, and then you expect to be done by June 30th? I mean, you just got the permit? Not to say anything about it, but.
I heard. Yes, you're right.
But I mean, to go from permit like now to really to move in June 30th, that is actually good. I
We're not
think, isn't
building,
it?
we're not building the.
No, I know you're not
So we're just
building it.
building walls and.
Walls and
right.
Interior stuff. But still, yeah.
4 months of construction essentially.
Sorry, Chair, I didn't actually ask to speak.
That's okay.
then just a reminder again, that's the office space and the boardroom space.
Yay.
All right, that concludes my CEO report.
Great. Any more questions? Okay, so we'll move on to item 3. Recommend the Silicon Valley Clean Energy Board of Directors approve addition to 2026 legislative policy platform on a Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant extension.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Excited to talk to the executive committee today about this item. So this is really a request to add an item to our 2026 legislative policy platform. As you might remember, the board adopts legislative policy platform every year with a policy direction to staff on how they think about different state and federal policy issues. And after that platform is passed, then staff goes and implements it by looking at legislation and comparing that to the policy platform. So what we are here before you today is to talk about adding a new item to the policy platform that doesn't currently exist. So the background on this one is that As staff, we think and anticipate that there will be new legislation out there this year to extend the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant. So to start, we just wanted to give a little bit of the history around Diablo and talk about some of the benefits and challenges and then our relationship with it. So you might know already, but at Diablo Canyon Nuclear Power Plant, this is a PG&E owned facility that has 2 units, 2 nuclear reactors. Unit 1 started operations in 1985 and Unit 2 in 1986. There was a lot of discussion about retiring the plant. So the CPUC actually approved a few years ago the retirement of Unit 1 in 2024 and Unit 2 in 2025. At the time, there was some discussion that with all the clean targets that the state has, that eventually with a lot of renewable penetration in the state, it might not be as economical to operate Diablo. And then this was also around the time that the Fukushima issue happened in Japan. And so I think there were a lot of increased concerns about tsunamis and natural disasters. Fast forward a couple of years later, in 2021, the governor really championed and the legislature passed SB 846 by Dodd. This was meant to extend the operations of both units of Diablo until 2029 and 2030. So at the time, there was a growing recognition that Diablo is really critical to the reliability of energy throughout the state. There was a rolling blackout just a short while beforehand, and the state was growing to understand that there were a lot of challenges, as we all know, to bring on new renewable replacement resources. And so there was a lot of support for the extension of the Diablo plant to those 2 dates. Since then, PG&E has gone back to the Nuclear Commission to relicense the facility, and they usually relicense in 20-year increments. So they asked for an extension of the license until 2045. Part of that work also includes getting the relevant approvals from the state agencies that regulate the plant. So the Coastal Commission permits were received at the end of December, and then just yesterday, the Central Coast Regional Water Quality Board approved the permits for Diablo as well. So with those actions, I think PG&E has completed all of the relicensing activities that it needs. But even with the relicensing going out to 2045, PG&E through legislation cannot operate the units past 2029 and 2030. So just to talk a little bit about the benefits of Diablo, as I mentioned, I think the state's really recognized its increasing role in reliability and clean benefits. So it provides annually 18,000 gigawatt hours of baseload energy. This is continuous 24/7 energy, very, very important to have. This is about 9% of the state's energy and then about 14% of its GHG-free energy. Also importantly at Diablo, as we learned on the tour that some of us were on recently, is that there's a lot of transmission capacity at the site. In fact, they're talking about putting offshore wind near the site so they can use the transmission capacity to bring that power to the rest of the state. So the location of the site is actually really valuable because of the infrastructure investments that have already been put in there. For the local workforce, there's about 1,200 staff full-time at the plant. Plus, every 18 months or so, they do these major refueling operations, and they bring in another 1,000 or so people to come in. So a lot of local jobs that's provided in the region from the plant. In terms of SVCE benefits, there's a couple that we wanted to mention here. The first one is around resource adequacy. So again, as a reminder, this is the insurance product to make sure that that the grid has enough electricity in those high stress grid moments. Diablo actually does provide resource adequacy benefits. We get an allocation of that at SVCE. So that is also very valuable. And then because the plant is online, it also helps reduce our obligations because the system has this resource as well. On the clean energy side, there's an allocation of about 5% of Diablo Canyon production, which also translates to about 20 to 25% of SVCE's energy needs that we receive from Diablo right now. And then, very importantly, I think Diablo represents important diversification of the resources that we have in the state. So that is also helpful. Just like other resources, I think nothing is absolutely perfect. There are some important downsides to Diablo that we wanted to mention to the executive committee. First, on the site location, this is located along the shoreline in California, and it's located near some major earthquake faults, including the San Andreas Fault. So there are some concerns about the earthquake readiness and the ability for the plant to withstand things like tsunamis. And then on the other very important thing to mention is that right now there is no federal repository for any spent nuclear fuel, and that is all currently stored on site at Diablo. So on our tour, we were able to see where they store the spent nuclear rods above ground, and they also have a water storage system for some of that spent nuclear fuel. But again, although there are long-term plans to move it to one centralized federal repository, that currently does not exist today. Just a little bit more about SVCE and our relationship with Diablo. So a few years ago, the CPUC directed PG&E to allocate, as I mentioned, the resource adequacy attributes from Diablo to CCAs and to other load-serving entities within CAISO's jurisdiction. And then as part of that requirement, all load-serving entities are offered the carbon-free attributes from Diablo. That's on a voluntary basis. So each load-serving entity can choose whether or not to take those. If a load-serving entity chooses not to take the attributes, then those are just not given out. It's not redistributed to other load-serving entities. And since 2020, SVCE's board has decided to accept the carbon-free nuclear allocations. We have calculated that acceptance of the attributes has saved SVCE roughly $8 million between 2020 and 2024. The board has directed us to use those to fund a variety of different programs, including EV chargers at multifamily. There was a portable battery program that we did for medical baseline customers. And then some of that money has also gone into member agency, community and engagement grants, and demonstration grants. Our team did some calculations about what the extended operations of Diablo might yield for SVCE. And we're estimating that it might be in the $2 to $12 million range annually in value. So as I mentioned, we are anticipating legislation to come out on Diablo. So far, there has been nothing confirmed in print, although we hear some rumors that there is a spot or intent bill out there that will become the vehicle to extend Diablo. So in preparation for that, staff wanted to come to the executive committee and board to get your feedback on a policy platform item so that we are ready if legislation were to come to actively engage on the issue. As part of this request, so the recommendation is to support an extension of the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant. But as part of that, staff has laid out 3 high-level policy principles that go along with this recommendation. So the idea is we would support an extension if these affordability provisions are included in any legislation. So the first one is that the extension is deemed to be a reasonable cost, and especially compared to other replacement procurement efforts or replacement renewable projects. Again, I think Diablo has a very unique profile in that it's baseload energy, and that can be sometimes very hard to replace. Another key portion of this is that there is a fair allocation of both the costs and the benefits of Diablo to all of the load serving entities as a high level principle statement. So again, the idea there is if we pay for part of the operations of the plant, that we should get a corresponding allocation of the benefits. Secondly, this is really important. As Monica mentioned, we're getting these procurement orders from the CPUC. Right now, through SB 846, the CPUC and the CEC are not allowed to consider Diablo's energy or attributes when they do their long-range planning and procurement. We think this is bad for affordability ultimately, that if we are forced to overbuild the system, that's not good for any of the ratepayers. So this is a key point that we want to make is if you extend the power plant, we should also account for it in our planning and our procurement. And then finally, the last item is about really maximizing market liquidity. So this really just means that we would support any efforts to allow load-serving entities to be able to buy and sell the attributes from Diablo. That way, if any load-serving entity does not want these attributes, they can sell them. And we think this kind of liquidity will help with affordability as well, by allowing people to basically buy and sell and trade. So with that, again, the request is to recommend to the board to add a new policy item to the 2026 legislative policy platform to support an extension of Diablo subject to these affordability provisions. With that, I'll turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you. Okay, so I think first we go to public comment. Is there anyone on Zoom for public comment?
No hands are raised for this item, Chair.
All right, okay, so then I think we need to get to the question and deliberation phase. Who has some questions or comments?
So looking at the last slide you had up which was the staff recommendation subject to 3 provisions that you had up there. I assume, so reasonable, so is it CPUC that's gonna make all these? So like inclusion in planning and procurement orders, is PG&E on the same page or who makes the decision? And are we actually aligned with PG&E on any of these 3 or does it not matter? I don't know if that question makes sense.
So the way this is written, it's really direction to staff to go advocate for these things in the state legislature. So the idea is that we would say to the legislature, you must have these provisions in here. And there's a lot of details to be worked out here.
Right.
So we didn't include that in this policy platform because it's
No,
pretty
and
high level.
I understand. I was just curious whether any of these are in alignment with what we expect PG&E's position to be or not. Some or all or none, and that's kind of, I don't need any more detail than that, just curious.
I think to Ben's point, we haven't seen what PG&E's put out there.
Yeah.
But I would imagine that PG&E themselves would want at least a second bullet
Yes.
point, right? They'd want
Yes.
to minimize their procurement requirements as well.
Right.
If they're gonna keep this on. The reasonable cost and fair cost benefit allocation, that's an interesting one because who's going to make that determination,
Yes,
right?
right.
It's kind of, it changes, it's not a one-time type of
Right.
thing. So I would imagine that would be an instruction the legislator gives to the CPUC to make that determination. And then maximize market liquidity. I would hope that the PG&E would support that because it's, just good for affordability.
It makes sense, right?
Yeah.
No, and that's what I thought, and I wanted to understand how, if everyone's supporting it, then that makes it potentially even more likely to get through the legislator versus if we're arguing with PG&E and all that. I have another question, which is, it's tangential to what you're asking us today, but it reminded me, and it's included in the staff report, that PG&E did not offer the resources in 2024. And so I know we don't really like to talk about the 2024 power content labels, but was this partially or even wholly responsible for that difference?
I'm gonna have to call on Marin or Chris, if I don't think Chris is online, but Marin,
If not, that's fine. You can just
Marin's
say
on the
no.
line. I don't remember why it is that PG&E didn't make it available in 2024. Like they had the option to make it available and it was an annual thing where they could decide whether to make the allocations available to us or not. For whatever reason, they didn't do it in 2024, but I don't remember why.
I don't know that they ever came out and stated explicitly why they made that decision. I will say that one of the things that SB 846 did was in some ways, it made Diablo no longer entirely PG&E's plant. And it really said that now that this plant is moving into when it was supposed to retire in this sort of afterlife, if you will, it becomes a state resource in many ways. And so the original legislation really prevented PG&E from making those calls themselves going forward. And so I expect, especially with this first bullet point, that any legislation we would support would ensure that Diablo is being allocated to those LLCs who pay for it, and it wouldn't really be PG&E's option anymore.
Thank you, that's it.
I'm just gathering, I was fortunate enough to go on this tour, it was really great, and I really talked about it, and so many people are jealous of me. That's the only reason, actually.
You talked about it.
I got to go on this tour, but I'm just gonna guess that due to the PG&E body language about being eager to have visitors, they want some positive PR. They're not on the fence about continuing to run this plant, is my gather. And so then I'm gonna guess they want support to get it moving, and then we'll figure out the details of who gets what later. Would that be a fair way to look at it?
I don't know that I can comment on PG&E.
Because she asked if we were all on the same page on this, and I think this sort of builds on that.
Yeah.
Yes, it does.
But I think from the staff recommendation, I think what we're trying to say is that, yes, we would support it if these things are there,
Yeah.
right? And these details are really important to us from an affordability perspective.
All right.
Yeah, like one fundamental kind of assumption here is the cost effectiveness one. And we've heard all kinds of different numbers. We heard a real low number when we were at the plant, where they said it cost them $70 a megawatt hour to run. But I've heard other numbers, much higher numbers.
Right.
And so at some point, that's gonna be one of the determining factors is, what is the long run cost to operate this facility? And whether it needs any additional capital investment or not. We heard no, right? But we'll see what's in the legislation.
And one of the things we learned on the tour was that by them having this short leash, they have to offer all their employees a 25% annual bonus as a retention bonus. And if there was a longer, I won't use the word leash anymore, if they had a longer span of operation continuity, then perhaps that could help make that cost less.
Yep.
Sure. I couldn't remember when I was trying to pull it up. When did we approve? We approved our advocacy for 2026 in
December.
December.
Yeah.
Okay. This is one of the few that we do it in December as opposed to
Yeah,
January. And I'm trying to remember what our statement was about nuclear in general.
We didn't have one, which is why we're here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think beyond this and Diablo Canyon specifically, I think it's worthwhile to have a general,
Policy.
pro, nuclear power investigation, evaluation. You have small nuclear power. The big thing, one of the biggest thing for Diablo Canyon was they have additional capacity on the lines that they could easily, for one thing, do wind power. But the whole concept of if small nuclear power was allowed, they have a perfect location there. And as much as, yes, it's like, yes, you have these two big nuclear power plants, but a smaller version. And from what they were saying, the spent nuclear power that they have now could be utilized for a small nuclear power plant. So immediately they're digesting the concern for a lot of people that there's nuclear at the site. So I would go beyond this and not narrow us into specifically Diablo Canyon, but in general, I think it has more value to have a more positive nuclear, stance overall from an industry standpoint.
Very helpful.
A clarification, I believe I heard that spent nuclear in the future could be handled for other uses, but once it's been processed and kind of encased, that's kind of what's sitting there is sitting there. That's what I heard.
Okay, and then You could be right.
Okay.
I just know that they said that there was value there. Now, whether or not they can get into it without issues, that's a whole
Yeah,
thing.
it seemed to me that what we heard is that in France, they are
Yes.
developing enrichment technology for that stuff, but we don't have that in America. We have rules against it.
Yes,
That are
we definitely
national.
heard that. They made it back to Jimmy Carter.
Yes, they made back to Jimmy Carter. Yeah.
Thank you.
There's a federal bill on that actually about reprocessing.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so.
Okay, it would be interesting to hear about that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think Director Klein is right on, and I completely support that. I also wonder if there is additional investment or infrastructure needs to be done, is that all gonna be PG&E? Are they looking now that it's extended and there's I need to get support for that it would also be others, or what, do we know?
I think these are all the details that
Okay.
legislation will figure out. As Marin said, the state kind of went through this transition where now the plant is seen as a statewide resource versus a PG&E resource. That all customers within CPUC's jurisdiction are paying for the cost of this. So I think that's one active point that will come up in legislation, is about who pays for the ongoing costs and how that's handled.
And sounds like we'll have some leverage. They really are looking to keep this going. Okay, thank you.
I had a question and a comment. First of all, what's the tent bill? Is that what you mentioned, a tent bill that this would be included in? Or do you know what it
It's
is
an
now?
intent bill or spot bill.
intent, okay.
Spot bill. So there's a lot of bills out there that don't have a lot of language in them right now.
Yeah,
By next Friday is the deadline to put real language in. So between now and next Friday, I'm expecting to see something more substantive come in. But right now, there isn't anything that is a dedicated Diablo bill that we can see. I confirm.
all right. And then just my comment, you know, I of course always take a look at the natural resources of what's there. There's 14 miles of coastline that essentially has been made into a refuge so that they can sequester this facility from things that it might cause harm. So that is an incredibly valuable thing from an environmental point of view. It doesn't have any, I mean, not necessarily a power point of view, but in terms of an environmental thing. They have just this incredible right of way, which is just so valuable. So I really wanna, you know, just reinforce what was said about there is opportunity for other power generation there. Whether, and it could be a number of things, new power plant it could be it being rebuilt, you know, small power plants, it could be wind, could be something I haven't thought of, you know, I mean, who knows, but that land and the way that it's configured and safeguarded is of itself is an incredible resource. And I don't know how to get that in the legislation or if you want to get it in the legislation, but I just want to share that. That's really a big deal. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about is we have information on tsunami layers that are expected and expected sea level rise layers. And I don't have them off the top of my head, but they are readily available from the Coastal Conservancy, the Coastal Commission for that area. So that might be some background information that you want to have, because one of the things I was really impressed with was how high this plant was in terms of being protected from certainly expected sea level rise that we're expecting to see on the bay. But you know, those are the numbers I kind of know, but I'm not so sure about the ones on the coast. But I think that that's a really big deal too. This is not at elevation 1. You know, that plant, what is, they say, was it 185?
300, so,
300.
it's a plant or storage of the material?
The plant I thought was what 185 and the storage was higher.
Was 300, so the storage and the diesel generators are 300.
So that is part of the sort of the you know, the land system and the plant that has value moving forward, because you know, sea level rise is a real thing, and especially if it goes on for 15 years, we'll have it. So I just wanted to bring that up as another thing to kind of, I think it's a big pro for this. Certainly the real estate is a big pro, but I think the elevation is also a huge pro. So,
Thank you.
I would bring it up. Anyway, and I think, you know, you heard, George and Larry and I talk about this tour. This tour was just great fun. We learned a lot. We weren't always sure that what they were telling us was the absolute truth. Like, you know, Monica mentioned the cost of some things that, you know, maybe other people, we didn't really verify any of
But it
this.
sounded good.
It did sound good, the verified, but we were really, really impressed by the incredible cleanliness of the facility, how very secure it was, and also.
Backups on backups.
And backups on backups, you know, that was very impressive,
They
so.
keep replacing equipment too, so it's not like they're, you know, they were about to end, so everything's about to fall apart
No,
rusting.
not like that at all. So anyway, if you have an opportunity to take this tour, Sergio Jimenez said he would be interested in organizing another one. It was a really nice 3 days.
There's a group going with CalCCA.
On Friday.
Oh, good, oh, good.
Can
Okay.
I just ask quickly on hers, do you have any idea who's gonna carry that bill?
It's just speculation right now. I
Okay.
should know more in a couple weeks.
All right, so it seems like we've come to the point, does anybody have any more comments? Come to the point where we need a motion and.
I'll make the motion to take staff's recommendation with the additions of a nuclear, let's say a pro-nuclear usage and I'll leave it to staff to do the wordings based upon previous comments.
Second,
Okay, well, actually, we have one from Director
Martinez Beltran.
Martinez Beltran. It's Friday. And that's right,
It is
it's Friday,
Friday.
you know, I was up till late and got up early, okay. And so now I think it's time for a roll call.
Yes, Meadows,
Yes.
Klein,
Yes.
Tyson,
Yes.
Showalter,
Yes,
Squizzola.
yes.
yes.
Thank you, that carries unanimously.
All right, great. So now we move on to item 4, recommend approval to change SVCE's fiscal year period from October to September to a calendar year period effective January 1st, 2027, and other necessary changes to allow for the implementation of the new fiscal year.
Heck, yes.
Yeah, I guess.
Ready to take a vote?
We could, I mean, yeah, that
All
has.
right, so maybe not that exciting, but hopefully
Very
more
good
efficient going
news.
forward for us.
Yes.
So yes, so that is the recommended approach to change the fiscal year to calendar year. We're asking the committee support to recommend that the board approve so. So what I plan to do is I'm gonna go through the little bit overview of our budget and planning process, how a revised process would look like, and then a proposed transition plan. And then we also need to change the budget policy that I'll go through as well. Go to the next slide. So as you can probably guess, why are we changing the fiscal year? The main reason, and there are lots of reasons, but the main reason is to align with our rate changes. As you know, right now, we set the budget in, the board approves the budget in September. 3 months later, we bring it back again for approval because we have better information that significantly affects the budget, and that's the PCIA and PG&E gen rate. And also, if we were to change this, we would not need to do at least one budget approval. And it aligns with a lot of our internal and external compliance requirements. Many of those are on calendar year basis. Our planning is calendar year hedging plans and so forth, employee benefits. A lot of the reports we have to do, there's always a mismatch between our fiscal year and calendar year. This will streamline all of this. So the board, the JPA does allow the board to do this. It has been done once before when we went from July, June to October, September, but that reason no longer applies. And so we'll go to the next slide. So a lot of you are familiar with this process. We basically start our process with the enterprise risk management assessments. We take the stress test proposals to the finance committee, give an overview of what we're going to do. And then, as you know, we complete that in the May timeframe, bring it to the finance committee, then to the board in June, assess the reserve adequacy. Then we have a requirement in our budget policy right now to do 2 months before the close of the fiscal year to do a preview of the budget in November. So normally we do a preview in November, so we have to very quickly have a finance committee meeting first week of August then the board preview. Then in September, we bring it back for approval and there's usually no change at all between the preview and the final adopted budget. And then as I mentioned, we bring it back again in November and December. Going to the next slide, with the new process, basically, we are going to continue with all of these processes. But what's going to happen is we're going to shift it over basically 1 quarter. So I'm not going to go through that because it's the same. But the key change here is that we're asking to change the budget policy so we don't have to do that preview. Because with the change, we will have the budget approval in December. We would otherwise be doing a preview in November, but there's no point in that preview because at that point, we are very busy with all the regulatory action that happens, informing us of PCIA changes, PG&E gen rate changes, which we will not have in time to prepare a budget bring to you in November. So that would be meaningless. So we're asking for that change. The only other change is we are required and we do meet with the finance committee at least a minimum of once a quarter. So with one budget less approval, we're still going to meet 4 times a year. On a planned basis, we can meet as often as necessary. For the first quarter, rather than having a budget review right now, they'd be reviewing the mid-year budget proposal. So the first quarter, we will do on a planned basis. Of course, there could be other agenda items, but we would do a reconciliation of the final adopted rates with what went into place. So we'll do an update as to how our finances have changed from any rate changes. So we'll give them a preview of that on a planned basis, and any other items that's for the finance committee's review. So this does require a transition period. So as you know, the current fiscal year will end September 30th, 2026, and that's going to continue as is. We will do a full audit for that fiscal period. But that leaves a gap from October to December, right? So we're asking that we create a 3-month, what we're calling a stub period. It's very customary for these type of changes to have a stub period. And we would ask that the board adopt a budget for this period. We will still do a budget approval in September for this 3-month period, October to December. And then we'll come back in December for the new fiscal year starting from January 2027 to December 2027, full 12-month period. We'll do that in December. Then rather than do a full audit for a stub period, as is customary, as was done the last time we had a fiscal year change, we're asking the board to approve and allow the auditor to do a combined 2-period audit. This would cover the 15-month period, the stub period from October 26 to December, as well as the first full new fiscal year covering all of 2027. So that's what's needed. The one change in the fiscal policy, budget policy that I've already hinted to is change the requirement for the 2-month preview. So we'll take that requirement. We're asking that we just bring the final budget 1 month prior to the end of the fiscal year, which would be December now. Okay. These are the 4 things we need on the next slide. Sorry, Andrea, I didn't keep in touch with it. I went through so fast on the slides. I'm already on 8th. But I think you can flip through these. So these are the 4 items specifically we're asked for to adopt a new fiscal period on a calendar year basis, establish a new stub period for the interim transition months of October through December, we'll adopt the budget in September, and allow for a combined 2-period audit, the 3-month stub period, as well as the new fiscal year for 12 months. And amend the budget policy to remove the 2-month preview. Any questions? And I ask for your vote.
Okay, so do we have any public comment online for this?
No hands raised for this item, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so then we come to questions and discussion. Questions?
I'll start there. So from a policy standpoint in audits, and I know we have the special thing about the stub period, and this is, you know, when I was raising the issue end of last year about like, why is it September 1st and just the way it had been. It makes sense that we're doing this transition. I'm completely in favor of that. From an audit period, And I don't see, is there value to audit that 3 months as opposed to a 15-month, it'd be 15 months, not 15 months, right?
Yeah.
The 15-month period. And have you already taken this to the finance committee?
And we are gonna take it to the finance committee next week. We're
Okay.
gonna take it to the audit committee next week as well. So all 3 committees will have seen it before it goes to the following week, the 11th March. We have talked to our accountant, we have talked to our auditor, they all support this. And they also informed that this is customary.
Okay.
You would not do a full audit for just 3 months, we do it for a combined period. This is customary in these circumstances, when they have mergers, for example, in the private sector. This is what they would do, and this is what was done when we changed this period last time.
Okay, and that was my big question is, do the auditors raise any issues? Because, this was always the question when this was brought up, that it's like that transition is a big unknown, but once you're past that, I think the cycle, especially as you lay out the cycle of review, saves staff time to not have that third check-in really what it comes down to. So you're reducing the amount of staff overload or staff load to go through another cycle in the finance committee and all this other stuff for additional work. So I applaud the effort and yeah, I'm happy with the recommendations. Thank you.
One addition to that is current auditor will audit for the period ending 9/30/2026, but that will be their 5th audit. So when this new audit will have a new auditor. Our policies require a change every 5 years.
Auditor or audit company? I can't remember.
That it could be the same company. We have not changed companies.
I know.
Definitely a new auditor.
Okay, and that's the standard thing. But I just wondered if that was part of the, is it a company or is it?
We'll take the proposal. We'll do an RFP, take it to the audit committee. So the audit committee will go through the recommendations to the board.
Okay, thank you.
I was just hoping you would refresh my memory about when we get the rates, the final rates from the CPUC.
So it's a long process, the regulatory process. The final rates, basically the CPUC makes a ruling in mid-December.
That's what I thought.
Authorizing PG&E, but we don't have final rates. Then PG&E has to do a computation, and they also true up some of the balances. Right up to that point, they do it through a tier 1 advice, it's called a tier 1 advice that applying to the PUC, which basically means I'm complying with things you've already establishing. It's a compliance sort of type of filing, you can think of it. Then the rate's going to affect January 1st. And basically for us, all practical purposes, it's in January we learn this. But as we know, by the time we do our rates mid-November, so we have a pretty good understanding of where they will be because all of the balances are out for most of the months. PG will true up for November, December, which we can project at that point. There could be some changes as there was this last period, which I'll go through in the media budget, which was favorable to us this time. Normally, there's not that big of a change, but there is an opportunity for a change.
So then it might be standard for you to come to us at the January meeting and say, we passed the budget in December and we got these final rates and this is how it changed or didn't change things.
Yeah, that's what I said we will do with the first quarter. We'll do it with the finance committee for sure, depending on the severity. And if it's significant, we would take it to the board. And we did at the CEO report when the January rate change happened. We did mention this positive change.
There's a lot of ways you could do it.
So depending on severity, and we will definitely do that, as I said, on a planned basis with the finance committee in the first quarter.
Okay, so I don't see any more comments or questions. Director Scazola, thank you so much for joining us on your vacation, or whatever reason you're there. Thank you.
Not vacation.
Not vacation.
But yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us. Do you have any comments?
NOT. No, I don't have any comments at the moment. Thank you though, appreciate it.
Okay, all right, so we need a motion. Okay.
I move that we recommend to the Board of Directors approve items 1 through 4 on slide 8 as presented.
Second. Okay, so we have a motion from.
Second. Oh, did I have the delay again?
That's okay.
We have a motion by Director Tyson and a second by Director Martinez Beltran. And so I think it's time for a vote.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, maybe clarifying, this is gonna go to the audit committee and the finance committee. I'm just wondering, board chair, if you would prefer this on consent or the regular agenda?
I think it has to be on the regular agenda. I think you need to educate the board that we're changing, but there's also the value of reducing load on staff and truing up a more standard fiscal year. I understand, I don't think it can just go on consent because conceivably there'll be a lot more questions. I think it's pretty simple, and especially when you explain it, I think people will be like, oh, that makes a lot more sense to electeds that are either calendar year or July 1st. The whole September thing has always been the question, so, yeah, all right.
We take public comment.
We did.
Better.
And the vote, Director Showalter.
Yes.
Scozola.
Yes.
Ms. Beltran.
Yes.
Klein.
Absolutely, yes.
Tyson. Meadows.
Still heck yes.
Thank you. Unanimous.
Very good. All right. So now we move on to item 5, which was the financial levers update. So model scenario and reflecting feedback. And I believe that's Jason Zagunas.
Yes, hello, see you all. I know it's like 3 p.m. on a Friday here,
Yeah.
thank you. And we just went through some great things, and now I'm coming to you with another great thing that is an important kind of strategic discussion that we're getting, I won't say the tip of the iceberg, we're getting a chunk of the iceberg. There's kind of more around this and behind it, and but we've tried to kind of distill it down to some of the key pieces, the key things, especially after the discussion we had back in December. So that's really wanted to start here with the timeline. This is where we are. We're midway sort of in the process. A lot of check-in points there, but today we're going to talk about some of the feedback that we got from the board and how we've kind of taken that and interpreted that. I've got a little bit more context and data points to walk through with you all. And then I have a scenario that we can look at. It's kind of an example scenario to really start thinking through what would this look like and tee up some of those key questions. So today, not an action item. It's really trying to get some discussion and feedback and thoughts from you all. I've basically covered this, so I'm just going to keep going with it. The recap, so a couple recap slides. First, this is the red line that's not horizontal, is our base case forecast. So that shows where we are today, about 530 days cash on hand, and at the end of the 5-year period where it gets us to. So you can see the horizontal bars are our reserve levels. So the green in the middle is our target. We have a max, and that's a max once you take out the unspent program and other dollars, which is why right now it looks above it. It's not actually above the max in that way. So the important thing just to note is this is what our forecast looks like. We're showing a large draw, and particularly in FY27, you can see there's a big kind of dip there. We also talked about levers last time, and really the question on that was which levers to use, what do they look like, and when do you use them? So the longer you wait, the less impact it can kind of have, or the more you need to do. So we kind of went through some of these last time. And then we also talked about the value proposition and the SVCE mission, which I think we all know. It's up there on the slide. This is what we communicate to our customers about who we are and what we do, and it's also what we hear from our customers when they say that they know who we are and how they know us. Okay, and then feedback from December. So we got a lot of really great feedback. I had the unenviable task of trying to summarize it into just one slide here. But so I kind of pulled this out. It's a lot of good feedback, some in conflict in some ways with itself, which is fine. I mean, there's this kind of advantages and disadvantages to different pieces. So we talked about balance. We talked about customer choice and simplicity. We talked about our mission and really being focused on emissions. We talked about the competitive aspect and our relationship to PG&E and kind of the rate that we offer to our customers. We talked about the stories we hear and that we tell to our customers about the investments we're making in their communities and things that they can see and how that drives positive associations. We talked about the value of steel in the ground, both on the power supply side and on the decarb is really something that we're proud of, that SVCE has been pushing, leading the charge on. And we talked about being innovative, but not necessarily wanting to be quite at the bleeding edge. And so just, we're Silicon Valley, we want to push, but also we want to do it sensibly.
One could be a bumper sticker. Our mission is emissions.
Well, we'll start pulling those ones together as we talk. So now I've got a little bit of new information, or really what it is old information presented in a slightly new way. But this is, I found this really helpful. So it's something that Scott on Amra's team suggested we put together, and it's sort of saying, let's look at this in terms of the rate that a customer sees. So PG&E gen rate, about 10 cents per kilowatt hour. This is over our forecast period. It's across customer classes, so it's not really a specific one you can find somewhere. But and keep in mind, there's another, let's say, 30 cents. That's the T&D side of this. But just looking at the gen rate, then you think about SVCE and the way that we today think about our gen rate. And when we look at this forecast period, this is kind of what it looks like. So there's the SVCE discount, 1% discount, and then there's the PCIA, which when we think about what we want to offer our customers, we include the thinking of that PCIA. So that leaves us on this revenue side with that 7.7 cents per kilowatt hour in our forecast. Then thinking about the cost side, you can sort of build something up in the same way. And that's what this is. So the big blue, dark blue bucket is the base supply cost. So that is it's the cost that we face to provide energy, to comply with all the requirements. We talked about midterm reliability. Monica was talking about that earlier, our compliance obligations, to serve our load, all of that. That's all in that big blue category. We have operating expenses to run the organization, to do all the work that we do. We have program spend. So that's the money that the board has approved to spend on local decarb initiatives. And then we have our voluntary clean position, which is the sort of additional clean goals that SVC sets for itself on top of minimum compliance. So you can see that it's really, when this all adds up to about 11 cents per kilowatt hour is our total cost. It's really driven by that basic supply cost, just what we have to do in order to serve our load. And over this forecast period, that's driven by a lot of what we're talking about today. We have compliance orders where we have to go out and do this. Those have costs. The cost of power supply has gone up in our forecast and over these last years because of some of these orders, these requirements. And we have other forces that are affecting the energy prices and the things on the rate. So all of this to say, I found this a very useful way to look at this. What this means is, of course, there's a gap in the middle, right? And I started with this, but just to say it's actually not quite that big of a gap because we've got other things, other income. We have income from our reserves and from some other sources, and we have the prepay savings, which is a really great thing that we have put together, the board has approved, and it makes a meaningful impact when we look at something in this situation. So looking at this, what this shows, right, is that we are choosing right now to draw from reserves in order to maintain this customer discount. And that's great. That's what the value of reserves can be. It gives us time to think about that. It gives us the opportunity to do that. And that time can be important because it can do things like the forecast could change and could change for the better or for the worse. We can get new clarity on a procurement order that changes something. Maybe they start counting Diablo Canyon in the thing that Monica was talking about earlier, and that, I don't know how meaningfully that would change the numbers here, but those kinds of things can affect this. And you can imagine that over the last, let's say, 8-10 years of our history, this has been in kind of a different way, right? We've seen it where we've been contributing a lot to reserves. But right now under the forecast, that's what this shows. And so what this says really is, there's some things that you can do with some of these levers on the voluntary clean, on the program spend, on continuing to try to, improve our efficiencies and operating expenses. Those are all things that we, look at and want to do. But at the end of the day, if this is the forecast and this is the kind of world we continue to see, it may be that we would have to raise our revenues, which is to say raise our rates to match our costs. And that the magnitude of that delta is such that it could be the only thing that we kind of have at some point in order to address this gap. So that's something we've been talking about in different ways, but it's just, I think, really helpful to see that and to know that that's a possibility. And we are not there today. And this is an illustrative, so it's made up, meaning I drew it. Rather than it.
Scott.
Yeah, no Scott and Amrit involved in this one. I just drew it, and it just shows, we have our base case, but there is a lot of uncertainty, especially as you get further out. But even in the near term, there's some uncertainty around what will happen. And this forecast is driven by what we see in the market. It's driven by our understanding of procurement orders and our load. Those are things that that can change, and there can be, like we're talking about, maybe they change some compliance obligation or something like that. And so you see at the bottom, I put these sort of stars where I was like, it's not just a nebulous forecast. There's also going to be moments where we may get more clarity on which direction things are headed. And that can be, again, in the positive or in the negative from our standpoint. There's also, we know that this is uncertain. This isn't what I think we would have said our forecast looked like 3 years ago. And so it's possible that things will change on their own, even if we don't do anything. But that, that's speculation, and you can't hope your way into a plan necessarily. But there is an element to uncertainty here, right? And so that's what we're faced with, is decision making under this uncertainty.
What's the number that, is it Morgan Stanley for our credit union, they viewed as being kind of our target?
Credit rating?
Credit rating, yeah, that's what I meant.
So I would say, like, what they've said, I actually have it here, I can give it to you. 350, maintaining 350 and above due to an increase, and that was Moody's. And they said ability to sustain, if we were to fall below 250, it could trigger a downgrade, one of the elements that could trigger a downgrade. But that's one indicator, and then also basically how we process the uncertainty.
There's a time factor too.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so moving back to the value proposition and thinking about our mission for a second, we have to provisions now that we feel aligned with the value prop we have and that we want to continue to communicate to our customers. And this came up as well in some of the feedback sessions, but one important thing is making sure that our customers, see and believe and trust in this value proposition that we offer. This is what we think of ourselves, and I think it's what we've been delivering, and part of our role and our job is to make sure that our customers see that and believe that authentically embody this. And I think these also line up again with the feedback that I went through earlier. You can feed in new steel in the ground. You can kind of see that in the value proposition. You can feed in the impact of local investment stories, things like that. So using this though, I want to talk for a second about the decisions we make on levers do affect our value proposition. So if we chose to move to a less clean product, what it would mean is, it would be harder for us to continue to claim this aspect of the value proposition we have today, because we'd be driving fewer new renewable projects forward. If we were to stop running local decarb programs, and I'm describing these in sort of, throw the lever all the way, which I'm not saying we would or wouldn't do. It's just easier to think about this way. It would mean that we don't really have local activity happening. So that community reinvestment piece isn't as present, isn't as visible. We're not driving the rapid decarbonization transition that we're trying to do. And that again ties back to the mission. Both of these first two tie back to our mission, because it's about emissions. And if we raise rates above PG&E, then it could be harder for us to claim the competitive rates piece. And that depends how high we have to raise them. And it depends what you define competitive to be, which you can define as, somewhere close. You can define as, well, it has to be cheaper. You can define as, different, but in the ballpark. Or you could say, well, if it's too high, then it's just not going to be competitive at all. But I think connecting now to that bar chart, the stacked bar chart I was going through, if you imagine a world where we may, at some point, if this forecast holds, get to the place where we'd have to raise our rates, then that's something that I think we need to think about with our near-term decisions as well, right? Because you could imagine a world where we say, well, we just want to do everything we can to avoid raising rates at all for as long as possible. And that would mean, we have to throw the rest of the levers. But if we still get to the point where those are much smaller wedges of the pie or of the stacked bar, and so at some point we could say, well, we've done as much as we can. Now we have to make sure our costs match our revenues. This is the action we have to take. At that point, we need to ensure that we have enough value proposition that we all feel strongly about and confident in, and that our customers have seen and that we've been delivering. So that's sort of the long-term, near-term interplay within all this uncertainty. So I'm just telling you what you already know, which is it's a tough decision, right? It's a tough set of considerations. So what if I offered you a scenario that had something for everyone, which I can't actually do? Not perfectly, but
it sounds good.
yeah, it sounded good. It was a great transition.
All right.
So the goal was though, all right, here's all the feedback that I heard from our board members and trying to package that into some scenario that makes sense also under this existence of the uncertainty. So that's what we're going to go into next. I called it the customer choice example scenario. You can imagine it would be saying, let's move our default clean product to a 4% premium. So 4% premium to PG&E. We would create a new minimum compliant product, which is a 1% discount. That would be less clean than what we are at today. And we would say, okay, if customers want to, they can opt down. And then to also sort of throw the program lever a little bit, I said, and we would throttle back our spend by, let's say, 10%. What this would mean is, it's customer choice. We would expect to maintain high enrollment because we would have customers who could opt down if they were very price sensitive. But, largely I would expect folks would probably stay with the clean product, even at a slight premium there. But I don't know. That's a conjecture based on kind of the things that we do know. And at the end, we will end with more days cash on hand in reserves. I'll show you that in a second. Drawbacks are there would be additional emissions, both because we are reducing our program spend. And so we are reducing our local impact, our ability to drive that transition. And we have a part of our portfolio that is now at minimum compliance. And so that has emissions associated with it. I also want to flag the savings opportunity diminishes as the RPS requirements grow. So what that means is as minimum compliance gets more and more stringent, our ability to say, well, we're just going to drop down to minimum compliance gets smaller and smaller, right? So it's sort of the savings there, if you want to think of it that way, shrink. Also, as we spend our program dollars, or if we were to choose to not spend some of the program dollars, that also will shrink over time because we have kind of a certain amount in reserves. But once we spend through that, the amount on an annual basis gets much smaller. And then opt-outs are still possible. Opt-outs are always possible. We're in a competitive business and environment. That's just what this is. So what would it do? Here's my graph again. Same base case line. The green line is the scenario, this example scenario, and I've tried to show the impact in two ways. One is happens at the end. And the end says, well, it would bump us up about 75 days cash on hand by the end of the period. The other way to think about it is this buying time idea, right? Which is to say, well, how much time does it give us before we hit 250 days cash on hand? And that's that top one. And so this scenario would buy us about a year before we hit 250 days cash on hand. If the forecast happens exactly as we're projecting, which no offense to Amrit and to the team, I think the one thing we can say with certainty is that it won't follow the red line perfectly. So what would it look like? Wanted to give you a sense of, practically how would we go about doing a scenario like this? It would mean we'd have to sell some of our existing resources because we've already gone out, at least in the near term, we've filled our positions. We're working on that. That's things that we're doing. So we would have to bring our position closer to compliance, to like a more minimum compliant level, although it would depend on, how many opt-downs, things like that. This would mean we would shorten our sort of position through financial, physical means, whatever it ends up looking like, to kind of shed some of our resources. We would, I think, proactively communicate to customers to help them understand what their options are and kind of make decisions around this. We would go after some of our large customers that we expect to be some of the more price sensitive opt-out risks and try to make sure that we're kind of getting them into deals that make sense for SVCE and for those customers. We would use the work that Zoe and her team are leading on the decarb roadmap refresh to say, okay, you know, based on a slightly smaller funding level, what are the programs we want to deprioritize and move away from? And, you know, when we talk with our customers, we would still be able to talk about the full value proposition. I think we would emphasize the fact that, you know, lifetime, we have delivered all these bill savings. We have had this clean energy impact. We've been doing local investment. We are here in your community, all the things that we talk about today. So it's sort of, that's my pitch on it. Doesn't necessarily change our value proposition in that way. And as I said, I think this aligns with the board's input. The downside is it doesn't fully close the gap, right? Certainly not on an ongoing basis. And even if you said we wanted to stay at 250 by the end of a 5-year forecast, it wouldn't get us there. But it would start telling us some things, right? We would start learning about customer preferences between products and where that would go. So in conclusion, I'm bringing it back to this. We're here. What I'm looking for today really is feedback, reactions as we think about taking it to the next and sort of final feedback opportunity, which is to say, that's an example scenario. It's not a proposed scenario at this moment. I think what I would want to bring next time that you see me on this topic is going to be a proposed scenario, and it would be with some alternative scenarios that look a little bit different, and we would include a little bit more on the expected impacts and kind of approach that each of them represent. But wanted to give you this example one so I can start getting some feedback on, hey, did that make sense, or what are your questions? I have a bunch of, you know, tee up questions here. I think maybe the main one that I would say is, I talked through this example scenario. How do you feel about it? What are your likes, your concerns? How do you feel about trying to maintain as much as the value prop and the mission as possible? Or there's other ways where we could pivot more towards one or the other. This relates to the stories we talked about back in December. And then 2, I think there's a piece of this, which is, let's say we wanted to do this scenario. Do we think about doing it right away in calendar year 27? Or what's your take on the sort of uncertainty in the forecast and the reserves that we have, right, which allow us to have time? So I'm going to end it there. I know I've been talking for a while. Appreciate everyone's engagement and kind of thinking about this now, but I'm going to turn it off to you.
Okay, do we have public comment on this? Because, yeah, okay, so is there anyone here for public comment?
Yes, there is. We have Bruce Carney. Whenever you're ready, Bruce.
Hello there, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I appreciate I'm hearing my feedback with a delay, which makes it hard to talk, but I'll do my best. It wasn't mentioned that SVCE has been less clean than PG&E for the last 3 years. And I think that's really important to know, and would be important to try to forecast whether PG&E is going to become a dirtier utility or if SVC has to essentially get back to zero emissions in order to be cleaner than PG&E. Another thing that seems to be missing is an understanding of whether all other CCAs are facing approximately the same situation and how the choices they make might constrain or affect the choices that SVCE makes. I personally would love to see Silicon Valley Clean Energy get back to being clean. I don't think that the 4% premium is going to scare away too many customers. I'm a little puzzled about whether SVCE would be going to a 3-product offering. The just barely compliant, the better than PG&E, and something else, or if you're just going to be a 2-product utility. I'll stop there because it's so hard to do this with all the delayed of my own comments in my earphones. So a chance to speak.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. Anyone else here for public comment?
No additional hands.
Okay, so public comment is closed. And so we'll bring it back to the board for comments and discussion. And I think it was Director Tyson who wanted to speak first.
Well, I didn't want to speak first, but I did want to speak.
Okay, well.
But I don't mind speaking first. You know, I appreciate getting this ahead of time. I think the way you presented it made it really easy for me to grasp even ahead of the presentation. So I can say that was really helpful to me, because I was kind of smiling as I thought of you trying to figure out how am I gonna divide this up, make this halfway work. Is the way I looked at it. And I came up with a question and beforehand, and now I realized I had the wrong question. My question is are wealthier people who are more interested in the environment actually smaller in load because they have their big solar panels and all of that stuff? And so it may be harder, it may be trickier to model what that split would be. You might have a certain fraction of people that choose your premium clean air project and it's not that much load. That was the thing I was thinking about. And now, the reason that's the wrong question is I have to remind myself that we're 70% C&I and 30% residential, and we respond to the public. And I think having that residential thing be cleaner is a big thing. I think that commercial and industrial might be more likely to go with the less clean but still compliant, and so that may be a giant part of the load. I'm just trying to anticipate how all this goes. And then the other big swing outside of BCIA and all this is we're only a third of the bill, and so as long as the transmission and distribution is a giant number, it matters what happens there so much more than what we do. And so I guess those are more comments than questions, weren't they? But oh no, I ended with a question, so it's still a question. And so I applaud what you do, and I'll just go ahead and say, I think you're on the right track.
I'm going to take one part of it as a question, which is, and this is related to something that Mr. Carney said as well, but you know, we don't know exactly, right, what some of our customers will do, whether they're more affluent customers, whether they're large load, non-residential. What we do know is, you know, other CCAs have done this. So I know San Jose Clean Energy, for example, for 2 years, they were at an 8% premium. And they had a opt-down product similar to kind of the scenario. And they essentially maintained a 97% participation rate. And I believe did not see very many opt-downs. And so they have, you know, a slightly different mix than us, but certainly some of the same companies are in both territories and some of the same. So there's some data points out there that we're looking at to try to do our guesstimates. Also, things are different than 5 years ago because in part the T&D side has gone up so much. And so affordability, electricity rates are on minds a little bit more. But yeah.
Director Scazzolo.
Hi, thank you. Are we still in questions? Because I have more comments than questions, actually.
I think we're combining them.
Okay, great. So I'm just going to voice pretty much the same thing I've been voicing for a while. I just feel that, you know, we need to keep the integrity of SVCE. And I very much admire and the concerns about how we're technically dirtier than PG&E or that perception already. So it feels like half the battle is kind of being lost right now for me personally. I really love having that like golden trophy or whatever you want to call it of something that we can be so prideful about that we truly are cleaner and cheaper. And so I guess my main comment is that I hope that we can find, I love seeing all these different levers. I love seeing that we have options and understanding that, you know, there are lean times and then there are times like we just had the other year where we're flush with cash, right? And we always have to adapt with this volatile economics that we have. So my main point is I hope that we can, you know, somehow pull the right levers so that we can maintain the thing that I love saying, that we are cleaner and cheaper than PG&E. So I look forward to the many more discussions, but I just, you know, want to continue voicing that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other comments?
Yeah, so I'll second especially, there's an education here that I think even the board needs, that it is just, it's the 1/3 concept of, it's only, we're only talking about 1/3 of the bill. We need to focus on what a standard residential bill will look like. And that needs to be part of this. It's like, okay, you're talking about $2 a month or whatever of that 4%. That becomes an important part of this messaging, especially how you sell it to the board. And it's like, oh, it's less than a Starbucks coffee a month or whatever it is, depending upon how much energy, how much a portion of that bill is true energy at the end of the day. So I think that's an important part of our messaging. In general, I hadn't heard that San Jose had, so they did a 2-year premium, then what did they do? Or are they still?
And they went back to being at a discount.
And then they went back to a discount, that's interesting.
San Diego had the same thing, by the way. San Diego Clean Energy had a premium with an opt-down program.
And so, as far as selling this, conceivably, when they did that rate increase, did they do that rate increase with it's a 2-year window, and we think?
I don't think so. I think
okay.
it was driven by, by what they were seeing, but I don't know the answer to that, but that's my understanding.
So yeah, so I'd love.
It was the market conditions that essentially pushed them one way and then pushed them.
Right, and right now we are fairly well with reserves. And so luckily we have that decision, that have that runway to make a bigger decision. I do worry about, and also as you're looking at San Jose, figure out their commercial versus residential mix. That's an important part of this,
It's not as heavily non-residential as ours, but it certainly has, some of those same elements, but yes, it is.
So yeah, whatever you can do to educate, the board and executive board on this, but I think you're going in the right direction. I worry about the number of opt-downs versus opt-outs. And that's my only, and as opposed to, well, you're playing games with me, you now are higher than PG&E, and you're forcing me to go through a process that I can still get my 1%. And this is the whole thing when we were talking about this year's budget. It's like, well, should 1% be 0.5%, and we immediately save $4 million? Was that it?
4%, close.
Yeah, so half, so 2 million.
Now it's more like 3.5, so.
Oh. Okay, anyway, but it's that sort of thing. As we look at what the levers are, I think but I think what you're doing here is the right direction. I worry about just whether or not there will be backlash from some cities or councils across the region. And people are very sensitive right now on cost, and whether or not, but educating them, somebody came door to door saying, look, Silicon Valley Clean Energy is causing your big bill. And I'm like, that's not the problem. It's the other 2/3. And so, but it's making sure that we keep ahead of that, staying clean, conceivably reducing programs if we have to. I'm happy that we're doing programs and decarbonizing and all of that. At the end of the day, I think it's more important to continue to provide clean energy as much as possible, and then decarbonize where we can. So maybe those programs are reduced by 50% a year or something of that nature. This is, right now we're flush with a certain amount of reserves, and we make decisions based upon that on all the different programs we're doing. Maybe picking, smaller cost pilot programs and then saying, oh, these are having the biggest impact. But that's for farther down the road. But getting a better picture of San Jose Power, getting a better, and San Diego for that matter, I'd be very interested to see how other CCAs are dealing with the issues and who is above PG&E's rate. And as Monica said previously, it's like, oh, if they started above PG&E's rate, nobody's complaining. In 1 or 2 of these CCAs, right? Or
They started above, I don't.
you said at least one of the CCAs had a rate that was higher than PG&E's when they started.
Yeah, I think some of the ones in SoCal Edison started, well, it was SoCal Edison.
SoCal,
they started
sorry.
off.
SoCal, okay.
Yeah.
but it's that sort of thing, and conceivably, not that you don't renege on your promise, but saying we're planning to do this for a 2-year period or a 4-year period and then reevaluate. And that in itself might be like, oh, it's a short-term thing, as rates and the CPUC and PG&E and SoCal stabilize. So I'll get off my soapbox.
If I can just to paraphrase sort of one thing back from the last couple comments, I just want to say, so I think part of what I'm hearing is, you know, we do have reserves, and so I think from my time question, maybe like that's a part of this is well, okay, you know, referring maybe to not pull the rate lever for, I don't know, as long as we can avoid it, but that's
I wouldn't,
part of what I'm.
for me, if we're going to make the decision, you know, and the big thing is, and that was another question. 4% as opposed to 2%, as opposed to 6% or 8%. 4% was just, well, it kind of extended a year and a half for the 250. Should it be higher?
Yeah, so 8% would get us to 250 by the end. Basically, I mean, there's any level that you can set and you can, you know, and this is all different burn rates,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Rather than even flat. So yes, there's a lot of kind of options with that. I think the other piece is I'm hearing both, I think, affordability comments and competitive comments. And those they're related, but they are slightly different, right? Where affordability is this whole argument of like, hey, we are just, and right now it's actually more like a quarter of the bill or a quarter of the rate. And so what we're talking about, these changes, is it's not a very large impact on the overall bill, but it is certainly an impact. And that then veers into the competitive piece, right? Which is that it's this question of like, well, is any premium, you know, is that too concerning essentially? And I think
I don't think so. I think that there are definitely members of our residents that like, oh, but it all goes down to the scenarios of, you know, here's your $400 bill, and here's how much distribution is, and here, and just, it's making that very clear for the board as well as residents when we're saying, oh, this is the effect of a 4% or 6% or 8%.
And you had it right earlier, 4%, about $2 a month.
Okay. Yeah, so
out of a roughly $200 average bill.
And that's an important part of the question. Okay.
That's 1%.
Thank you. Sorry.
No, great.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. I think that you are also on the right track. I think everybody likes choice. And so I would encourage that. I do like having as well, having that little, you know, competitive edge of the cheaper rate. I don't think it has to be a huge thing. I think having and offering that kind of keeps to our original mission and the name. And I really see what you've said before, that I feel that our educational piece and the inroads we're making there also compensate for, you know, for the change that we want to see. I would like for those programs to focus on the youth, because I think that they are the future of, you know, of our consumers. And I would like to see that focus on renters who maybe aren't into the buying yet. I feel like we're missing a piece of that. So those are some of the places for me. I don't think we need to, you know, grab that lever and hang on it as far as the difference in pricing. Perception, as we all know, being in politics is reality as well. So even though if it's a small something, it's a nod to, we understand if we're making impacts in other ways, such as scholarships, programs, rebates, things that people can feel, and they get the choice to decide what is it that they want to upgrade, how can they get there closer that works for their family. What works for me in a house of 5 crazy people probably doesn't work for Pat, you know, and so I think it's good for people to have that type of choice. That's it. Great job.
couple things. Oh, we have an answer. Go
No,
ahead.
I haven't, but
No, go ahead.
okay. So, this is obviously difficult. So what I feel would be helpful, and we talk about, higher or lower than price wise PG&E, but when you talk about it, it sounds a lot if you say, let's say 4% that we used to do. But it really only, that translates to, what would it be, $8 a month?
It's about
$2 a month,
Yeah.
so there needs to be, that's just not the same thing, the absolute there is so small. And so if we had a pie where you're actually reflecting how much difference of the overall thing. So if your pie is you're going from 200 to 198 on the bill, that doesn't really matter. I think to almost anybody. I can understand the principle we have to be cheaper, but I do think cleaner is more important because otherwise then what's the point, right? So, it's already, well, I don't want, the power content label is already kind of embarrassing, right? And I know there's some unfairness to it, but I just think that's.
Can I clarify?
Yeah.
We had 1 year where
Yeah.
we didn't meet 100% clean.
Right, 2024, right?
Every other year, we've been 100% clean.
So that,
So the only.
yeah, but that's the one that people are still using. We need 2025 to come out, yeah. But it is.
But it's not, we don't have an embarrassing power content label. We have a very clean portfolio, very clean power content.
Okay, it was used, we had a use of the power content label in our city this week, and so, anyway, I don't wanna go into it right here, but anyway, so even if it's just 1 year, it's awkward. Okay, let's call it awkward then. Anyway, and I know that's why I touched on it a little earlier when we were talking about Diablo Canyon. I was trying to understand that that's a different item, so I'll move on. I do wonder, so obviously we're all invested in thinking about this a lot. What proportion of the customer base, once they make their decision, or even if they look at their bill every month, actually thinks about these kind of things? How, what proportion of customers take advantage of programs? And I value I'm not saying I don't value the programs, I do value. You have this, what I imagine to be the apex predator level of customer who understands what's available through SVCE, but then the vast, 90%, whatever the percentages are, I don't know if we have a good feel for that, people who don't think about their bill like this. And so, again, I think we have to understand the proportionality of what we're talking about here to actually be able to drive change. Because if we're actually talking about proportionality for people who are informed, but only 5% of our customers are informed, then that's gonna have not much impact either. So I feel, I don't know if you've done market research and conjoint with actual customers, so you've done it with the board, but what do they care about? Including it's hard with selection bias, you can't really get an uninformed customer because they won't participate in the market research. So I understand that conundrum. But so I just worry that we could be over engineering to a very small portion of the population and make absolutely no difference in the end and I don't think that's the case, but I just wanted to, because as I listen to this, and I've done a lot of forecasting in my day, I've done market research in my day, and I just don't know what proportion of customers will respond to any of this.
No, all great comments. Sorry, is it all right if I respond?
Yeah.
Okay. So you all heard from Pam last month about, I think it's 7 minutes on average that customers think about their utility bills and.
I'm surprised it's that much,
But I know it too.
And we do have surveys that we do. The top topic for customers generally about their utility bill, especially right now, is price. What we're doing right now in the survey we have out on the streets is we're trying to ask, well, what is the willingness to pay though? So yes, we understand prices are high. That's 3/4 of it is not in our control directly. It's not something we're doing. And so what if we're talking about $2 a month? What if we're talking about $5 a month? What is the reaction there? So I'm hoping that we're gonna have a little bit more information about our kind of, let's call it a generic customer.
Right.
On the residential side. Now you have to remember, we also, right, we have
Yeah,
a ton of the non-res.
Right.
And they, we talk with them, we talk especially with some of our largest customers. Some of them are very much tracking prices.
Well, they should be.
Some of them
You would
are also
expect
very
them to
much
be.
tracking our power content. And they're saying, oh, we have our climate goals, we have our commitments. So there is still this blend of customers. And so I think in some ways that speaks towards this customer choice idea, but I think those are all fair comments. That's what we kind of know right now. We do look at these customers, we do kind of try to get this sense of how much do people care or aware.
But if you're looking at $2 out of our 200, but that's really out of a total of 600 if we're
It's
a
not all
third.
200, it's the
Oh, that's the whole, okay, the whole,
All
all right.
It's 1/4.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So
So,
for 1% change on the bill.
But it's significantly different for our CNI customers.
oh yeah, no, I absolutely, but I feel like, so then this presentation actually doesn't help us understand if this is geared at our overall customer base or our residential versus CNI. And so should we be focusing on CNI then? That's where, so again, I understand the thought process and I appreciate it and I understand how it was built up. But maybe so is this everybody?
Yes,
This is everything?
No, okay.
No.
You can create different products for different customer types. That is something that we can do. And in some ways we have it where we do have the ability to do custom pricing that the board has given us with some of the large non-residential customers, right? But what this is yes, it's an example scenario. And so what it says for simplicity is, well, let's just say we have 2 products and I think those products, for a non-res customer who is very price sensitive, there is an option now here, right? Also on one of the slides, what I put was we would still continue to work on our custom pricing because those are places where we can work with a large customer to both meet their climate objectives as well as kind of protect us on the financial side in some way. So there's good options I think for a slew of customers, but that's something that we're talking about is, do we have other rates, other options as well for some customer classes?
It's just that, and I'll say, and obviously being from one of the smaller jurisdictions and you even smaller, is when I think of customers, I think of residents. And I would think about this exercise very differently if you put on a Sunnyvale hat or a Mountain View hat and you looked at the proportion. And I just haven't been making that distinction because there could be those are actually bigger differences between those 2 customer bases than the levers you're talking about here.
And I think
Could
that,
potentially
what
be.
Justin, he is showing you a hypothetical, a very
Okay.
simplistic approach. I think what we would bring is more of a menu of different tiered rate products by customer class. So
Okay.
competitive for our CNI customers may be not just a discount, but maybe it's the ability to offer them a product, maybe not even under a contract, but just offering them a standard product that mirrors what's available in the wholesale market if they were to go direct access. So it's just a pass-through type of rate. Or maybe this is something that Clean Power Alliance does, is because they have some very heavy industrial customers in their service territory that just want the lowest possible rate. They offer them the minimum compliance on clean, right? This is
And
the-
you can see,
this
that
is
makes
the
so much
cheapest-
sense, right?
Yeah, and that for them is competitive, right? And sometimes it might be higher than what they would have got if they've got a fixed price. Sometimes it might be lower, but that's what competitive for them means. So I think if we got the direction to be able to move in the direction of offering tiered products, then we would develop that kind of menu of products based on the different types of customers.
Director Scazola.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to make a couple additional comments. One being that I very much appreciate what the vice chair has brought up, and I fully agree that it would be great if we could really emphasize a tiered product perspective, especially for our, more wealthy people, or they're, maybe they're not wealthy, but they just love clean energy so much and they're willing to pay that price, like we talked about before. I also want to echo the comments of Director Martinez Beltran with the affordability. I think that should really remain a very heavy focus, especially for folks on the lower end of the spectrum, renters in particular. And last, no, I already said it. I really want to. I forgot to make this comment earlier, so I'm so glad the vice chair brought up that. I think that if you're well off and you believe in the cause, then I'm sure you're willing to pay a premium. And so I think we should really focus on that as a beginning. That should definitely be a key approach to this. Thank you.
Okay, well, I have a couple of things I'd like to weigh in with as well. First of all, I do think we need to separate out C&I and residential. They're so different, and it's a little hard for me to kind of understand what the differences are, but I would expect it's primarily for C&I. They're much more cost sensitive than residential. On the residential side, I would say in my community, the $2 is meaningless. But what does really make people excited is how many GHG emissions we cut. So I think we need to be talking about what's the difference in contribution that they're doing. And particularly if you live in an apartment, you don't have that many ways to, in a sense, sort of donate. I mean, you can donate to the Sierra Club, but you don't have that many ways of your sort of in your personal life to donate to making the planet better. You can compost, but anyway, and I think this is one way. And a lot of people could afford $2 a month. If they knew that, they could say, oh yeah, I can afford $2 a month, even if they live in an apartment. I mean, think of it, apartments are really not cheap. Apartments are not in view, a 2-bedroom apartment that's nice is $5,000 a month. I mean, that is a lot of money. I don't know what the electric bill goes along with them, but it's not, it's not peanuts. It's not peanuts, yeah. So I think, we need to put a little more emphasis on the environmental value. And another thing I have heard people complaining about is they don't really know how much energy or particularly energy they are saving or not saving by electrifying. And so, I mean, it's not a lever we can, necessarily pull, but I just wanted to bring that up, that when I hear people talk about what they want to know in terms of the programs that we're asking them to do, they really want to know, is this going to cost more electricity or not? And how much more, and what's that going to cost than the gas? I want to know that. And so if we had some comparisons of that, I think that would be good. But particularly, what are the emission savings? People really care about that a lot in Mountain View. And I doubt it's different most other places.
And we do have those calculations, and
we
do push that information out when we're trying to get folks into our program. But it's good to hear that feedback. There's always opportunity to try to do more of it. I want to say though, on the point on emissions, and I think this kind of came up as Monica talked about, there's CCAs that have other product offerings. If we create products that are, let's say, minimum compliant for some of these customers, because from a cost standpoint, it's very competitive, right? That will have emissions impacts for every community that has those customers. And so that's a part of it, right? Is that when you then look at what's happening in the community, sure, a customer, to your point, maybe says, oh, it's $2, that's not that much. But every non-res customer in the city now is, on some other rate. There's going to be, when we think about that value proposition and this sort of trade-off on the emission.
And yet, I agree with you, that's true. And yet, when I think of our marketing and retention point of view that these big corporations have, they do not want to have to tell their employees that they are using dirty energy. I mean, that's the last thing Google wants to have to say. And I don't know about the other big owners, but they have all this marketing that they use on how clean they are and how they're pushing sustainability and that sort of thing. I mean, it's really their, you know, their part of their mystique. And so I think we should just make it terribly embarrassing for them if they want to go in that direction, frankly. I mean, this is closed meeting, right? Or
No.
All right. I do think that people,
Yes,
you know,
I love
people
it.
should understand the impact of their behavior, whether they're a corporation or a resident. And so I do think letting people know, okay, sure, you can save this money, but just remember that this is what it does. We should be balancing the environmental and the financial information at all times.
That's right. There is another model out there in the CCAs that Ava uses, by the way, where they opt an entire city into a 100% clean product. And so they let the city councils make that decision if their whole entire city is going to be 100% clean or not. And if a city doesn't opt in, then they get basically a standard product, which is minimum or a little bit above minimum compliance.
Yeah.
And I'll just throw in, very difficult in an election year.
Let's wait till the next one.
Oh, yeah.
Can
That's
I
true.
just say, Chair, I just want to, I think I already said it, but to what Sally was saying, as far as, you know, most people are not realizing or really don't, it doesn't make that big of an impact, right? The $2. And for me, that's the whole reason why I think it is important to have that small difference, because then we can say we're cheaper. Maybe it's 1%, maybe it's not much, but we in fact are.
It's a principle.
Right, and it's just the people, I mean, I will admit, do not have time to be looking at my bill and combing through, you know, people need computers and whatever they need at home. That bill's gotta be paid, that's it. I know in my brain, it's 1% cheaper, fantastic, I'm contributing and doing my part. And everybody's moved on from there. And I think, you know, as she's saying, I think the vast majority of people are in that space and not just kind of combing through. So I don't think it has to be a big leap if we're doing all of the other things, talking about the environment, doing the programs, on and on and on. I just think that that's a good default for us to have, if we can.
And the other thing I would say is that, you know, after I listened to 50 speakers about flock on Tuesday. One of the things that came through is that people really care a lot, particularly now, about transparency.
They do.
You know, they want the facts, and they want to be able to believe the facts. So I think that too is something that we should be cognizant of, is that we want to just share the impacts of things with people.
That's a good point.
Okay, so, Elliot.
Yeah, thank you. I just, that was interesting, very fascinating. I hadn't heard about the potential for cities to opt in. So I could see how it would take residents to put pressure on their electeds to do such things. So that's very interesting. I hadn't heard about that. Building off of that, I'm curious if there's ever been, and forgive me if I forgot if this has ever been spoken about before, but it dawned on me maybe there's a different approach we can take where, much like organ donation on your licenses, at least how it used to be, where they asked you, it's like marketing before you get your license, they do it, you know, every teenager getting a license. There used to be the marketing, it was very pro, like, oh, be a hero, you know, be an organ donor, right? And just get the sticker and thank you, that's all it was required. Maybe we can do something similar where we do spend a little bit of money for an active campaign that we say, do you want to be a climate hero? And if so, you can opt in. You can opt into this, and it's only $2 or $3 or whatever, and then even allow for higher tiers there. If you want to be a superhero, then you'll do $5. If you want to be like the most amazing hero ever, you'll $10 a month extra, and we'll dedicate that money to, you know, fighting for all the programs you believe in, making sure we're 100% clean and affordable and all the good stuff. Anyways, that's my 2 cents. My last 2 cents, I assure you.
Yeah, so picking
And send them a cake.
what product, right, is the default product is also an important part of all this. So as Monica said, that can be done at a city by city level. If that's something we wanted to do, it could be done where you opt everyone into the minimum compliant product and you try to get people to opt up. It could be done where you keep people at the clean product, even if it's at a premium, and you let them opt down. Those are all the options that we have. Just to say, whatever you opt people into, you should expect that that's where a lot of people are gonna be and where they're gonna remain, right? Because there's an activation energy to change. And so that's just important to keep in mind and be aware that no matter how great, we have a great team that can do the marketing and the outreach and put all that together, but no matter how great a job you do, you're dealing with activation. You're actually asking people to do something. So that's gonna be
So good.
something to consider.
I love the hero line, and I want a green cape with that to be handed out to all the finance managers at the city council.
We can get those for Earth Week. This year. Okay, so.
Say, sorry, one
Of
just one
course.
other thought on it.
Yeah.
You also, the other thing that the math of the stack bar chart, right, what that shows is that we have to remember that it's possible that if this forecast continues, we would get to a point where we say, oh, well, we've moved to minimum compliance, let's say. And we still would have to, at some point, make it a minimum compliant product that is more expensive. Because you have to bring and that could be for a short period, it could be like some sort of new operating situation. It depends where the forecast goes. That's probably out of the 5-year window, but that's something that we have to think about because again, the decisions we make in the near term affect the value proposition that our customers see and that they associate with us on an ongoing basis so that in those moments, that's what they rely on. Okay, sorry.
That's a really good point. The point here is that we are gonna be constrained. We're gonna have to do something at some point. And it's just the reality that we're gonna have to face and we're gonna either hurt on the climate, hurt on programs, or hurt on rates. And nobody wants to do it, but it's our reality.
Yeah, but it's a slow moving boat.
Exactly.
And it's not a crisis. It's good that we can be thoughtful about it.
Okay, so no capes.
Yeah. And Amrit has one, our financial, our CFO has
I
a
just want to
comment.
make one comment. We actually have a competitive advantage relative to PG&E, right? Justin showed us we have prepay savings they don't have access to. We have money from investment incomes from our reserves that they don't have that we can bring lower. It's not that we are not competitive. We're actually more competitive and we're not doing a good job. It's the way the PCIA risk profile is structured, which we are trying to change, which also means we have years when we make a ton of money. That's why we need the discipline. Don't give it all away because you're going to need it in these years. That's what creates a huge risk profile for us. It's volatility. We get really good years. It's like the climate change, a lot of volatility. Dry years and really wet years. Okay. Same in our financials. So that's what we're trying to manage. And just want to make sure you have that picture. It's not that we are not competitive. We just got to stay in the long term and be financially viable for our customers. Another way I would explain to our customers is when the S&P goes down, what do the portfolio manager say? Don't just liquidate, right? You're in it for the long term. And Justin said our long-term value proposition, you're still cheaper.
So add two more competitive advantages. We don't have to pay any shareholders because all the people are our shareholders. And we have high quality board members who serve for no added compensation.
Yeah, we're just getting sandwiches, which is.
Are you
I
calling
I think it's a selling point for residents.
We get sandwiches, she said, I love you.
It adds to transparency. Work for sandwiches.
Work for sandwiches, okay. All right, so seems like this has been a very productive meeting. And thanks to everyone for attending. And I believe do we have any committee or staff remarks? Seeing none? Okay, any announcements? No? Okay, well, seeing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everybody.